And again, what's the tendency toward a doctor once you have the diagnosis? The tendency is they don't want to necessarily do anything other than treat your symptoms with drugs. The same drugs that damage your gut, the same drugs that cause malnutrition, the same drugs that cause what I like to term grain-besity or weight gain. Now, grains can cause obesity and weight gain as well, but the reality is the drugs specifically used to treat chronic inflammation, the steroids, are the most favorite. I see so many people coming to see me that have been on steroids for years. And one of the problems with steroids long-term is they lead to muscle loss. Steroids are what are known as a catabolic steroid, or I should say corticosteroids are a catabolic hormone, meaning they break down your muscle and your bone. That's why the side effect or the risk of being on these is muscle and bone loss. Now, when you lose your muscle, one of the things that happens, muscle loss shortens the muscle. And when you shorten the muscle, you compress the joint. And when you compress the joint, you inflame the joint, you irritate it. And so then you get inflammation. So the actual side effect of the thing that you're taking to reduce the pain and the inflammation is leading to the atrophy of the muscles, which leads to the shortening of the muscles, which leads to the compression of the joint, which leads to the inflammation in the cartilage, which recreates a new kind of arthritis. So there's different kinds of arthritis. There's autoimmune arthritis. See, this is when your immune system is attacking your cartilage or your joints, but then you also have degradatory arthritis, what some doctors like to call aging. I don't call it aging because aging means that everybody who ages would actually develop severe arthritis that degrades them. But that we don't see that in the aging population across the board. We see that in people who over time take polypharmacy, don't exercise, don't have good diets, don't have good lifestyles. And so these individuals end up with what their doctor's calling osteoarthritis or degradatory arthritis, but it's not because of any other reason than they're not dealing with the actual cause. So when you have this type of pattern, it can lead to a diagnosis of a different kind of arthritis, and then they're telling you, yeah, this is different than your autoimmune arthritis. You actually have two kinds of arthritis. Lucky you, right? You won the lottery. Now you have autoimmune arthritis and you have osteoarthritis or degradatory arthritis, and neither one of those things is really true if you understand this pattern. So if we look at grain, so grain consumption comes with a lot of problems, and so gluten is just one of them. And I've shown you some evidence tonight about gluten being a major trigger factor. And I've got the total show notes for this. I think I put a link up earlier, but if you go to glutenfreesociety.org, go to the blog there, we have an entire huge article with all of these references and links. And these are things you can click on the links and you can print out the actual studies and you can take this stuff back to your doctor and have that conversation with them. We put all these resources together for you because we want you to be able to take advantage, not just watch the show and then have a conversation with your doctor, because your doctor's not going to listen to you. That's the reality. Your doctor, though, is going to listen if you put down 10 research studies in front of them and say, I want this because of this. And that's going to open that dialogue if you walk in there intelligent, but also with evidence, because I can promise you your doctor's not reading these research studies. Not unless is somebody that I personally trained. I trained thousands of doctors in my career, medical doctors, osteopaths, chiropractors, etc. But if I didn't train them, they're probably not reading about this information. They're just not really all that privy to diet and lifestyle as a source for disease. But again, going back to this, we know gluten is one of the factors in grain, but there are other things here. And so let me blow up this diagram a little bit. Let's see, is it going to let me do it? There we go. Didn't want to get bigger for me. Okay, it might be a little blurry. We're going to keep it as non-blurry as we can. So other things found in grain: heavy metals, excessive omega-6, Excess omega-6 imbalances your fatty acid ratios. Remember, too much omega-6 promotes inflammation and pain. We know that grains can cause leaky gut. I showed you that earlier. We know that grains, specifically if you have a primary grain-based diet, it's, where grain is the staple in the diet, we know that quantity of carbohydrates can create an issue, and that excessive sugar leads to changes in hormones like cortisol and insulin. We know that grains are often contaminated with mold and mycotoxin. We know that grains are contaminated with chemicals like your glyphosate. People keep asking me about glyphosate. Those of you who've been asking me about glyphosate, I probably get this question 20 times a day. Go check it out on Gluten Free Society. I did an entire interview with one of the experts on this topic. It's about an hour long, and we broke down glyphosate together in a very detailed way to give you that information. But yes, is glyphosate a problem? It sure is. And if you're eating a lot of grain, does it come with a lot of glyphosate? In most cases, yes, it does. Molds, I mentioned mycotoxins, which aren't the same thing as molds, but they're toxins that molds produce, are another aspect. Again, we got pesticides. As I mentioned, glyphosate's just one of them, but there are other pesticides like atrazine, which acts as a chemical estrogen. And then we've got a family of proteins, one in particular called ATIs, amylase trypsin inhibitors, and these proteins actually inhibit digestion, so they can shut your pancreas down and make it harder for you to digest, creating leaky gut. The bottom line is all these qualities about grain as a food, right? Which is why when I wrote No Grain, No Pain, I didn't call the book No Gluten, No Pain. I called it No Grain, No Pain, because grain comes with all of these agents, and all these agents can stoke the fires of chronic inflammation. And what happens when we're chronically inflamed? What happens? One of the primary side effects is our cortisol response goes up. So we have an increased production of cortisol. Well, I just told you, steroids cause muscle loss. Cortisol is a steroid. Now, you can either take steroids in the form of drugs, like you can inject yourself with corticosteroid in the joint or where it hurts, or you can take oral prednisone or oral steroids or cortisone. But the fact of the matter is when you take it, remember, over time, breaks down your muscle, shortens your muscle, compresses your joints, leads to inflammation. Cortisol also causes weight gain. Now, part of that weight gain is through water retention. It causes an increase in water and H2O. Excuse me. And that H2O retention, again, if you're packing 10, 15 extra pounds of water and that is around your joints, you get heavier, right? You get fatter. Basically, I talked a couple of weeks ago on heart disease, and we were talking about how some people like to say, "Oh, I'm big and beautiful." When we were talking about, it's not about being big and beautiful, because big and beautiful means you're big and inflamed. Because being obese means that you're inflamed. At least if you live in the U.S. or if you live in an industrialized country, that's what it means. So being overweight means it's actually a visible, physical, clinical manifestation of inflammation. So we don't want to see this, right? This is a representation of all this happening over time, which again causes you to gain weight, causes you to retain water, causes your joints to be under more pressure, because every extra added pound on your knee joint, on your hip joint, on your neck, on your shoulders is going to increase the wear and tear of those joints, and it's going to further degrade your joints, leading to an osteotype of arthritis. So even if you started out with an autoimmune form of arthritis, you end up with an osteo form of arthritis. So that joint compression and that pain, oftentimes, I don't know about you, but when I see people that have a lot of pain, they don't tend to want to go exercise. Like, they're in so much pain, they don't want to exercise their muscles or their joints because it hurts. And so they have exercise avoidance. And what does exercise avoidance lead to? Just draw a circle right back around to that. More joint compression, more pain. Okay, more weight loss. And that's why this is a cycle, right? The arrow comes back right back around. Exercise avoidance leads to more muscle gain or rather more weight gain and more muscle loss, more joint compression and pain. And until you isolate and identify this is a problem, then you don't stop this cycle. This cycle just continues on ad infinitum, and that's not a good thing. So again, if you want to break the cycle, recognize where it's coming from. Recognize the cause, celebrate the cause, don't fear the cause.
Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.